Okay, good afternoon. Thank you very much to the organisers for inviting me here to talk to you today. So this is a paper on blue space and subjective well-being. It's a review paper, so just to state that at the beginning, that it's not, there's no new empirical research in this paper. It's a paper by myself. I'm an environmental economist based in UCD, and with a master's students I'm working with Anna Oneda. So it's a joint piece of work, and it was motivated, I guess, both by previous research I've been involved in that I'll show you a little bit later, but also by observation during lockdown. So lockdown in Ireland, like other countries, happened in 2020, and people flocked to coastal areas. So much so that the police had to shut. They had to stop people going to coastal areas. They were so popular. So that was one of the motivators for why. What was it about blue space, particularly coastal blue space, that was so important for people? Talking about coastal blue space at a conference in Luxembourg, probably a little bit off topic, but it's hopefully we've some interesting findings. Okay, so the overview, go through the motivation of the paper, talk about European Union water policy, very important, particularly in an Irish context, methodology of what we how we frame the paper, some of the results, and then summarize some of the key findings and some recommendations for future research as well. So there's a very strong link in the literature between natural environments and well-being. So I've been working in this area for quite a while, since the early 2000s, and I think some of the references put in previous papers, Catherine Redance, Heinz Welch, etc. Lots and lots of research in this area showing links, positive links between environment and well-being. My own research as well, but previous research tended to focus a lot on the health promoting effects of green space. So lots and lots about green space, which is great. That's absolutely fine. So natural environments in urban settings associated with a reduction of levels of air pollution and noise, extreme temperatures in cities, which is obviously becoming very important in the context of rising temperatures, climate change. So that's not knocking the green space research at all. Then, in terms of, I think it was Carrie said earlier today, in terms of governments becoming very interested in these measures. So we have the OECD wellbeing framework that includes natural capital, obviously as an input, and environmental quality as well. But what a lot of these frameworks don't include is that experiential experience with the environment, how people actually interact and spend time in nature. I think that's slightly missing from some of these. You mentioned earlier in terms of the integration of well-being into policy making in governments, and it's interesting in an Irish context anyway that it's the Green Party that has introduced these measures, and when it's in government they're in, when they're out of government they're gone. So unfortunately it's not a systemic issue, it's a systemic in terms of ongoing the UN Sustainable Development Goals, good health and well-being, obviously very prominent in that, and also environmental amenities for the environment's sake. So we know that the UN Sustainable Development Goals include life below water, life on land, and of course the impacts of environmental quality through the factors of production, which are very important as well. There's the Wellbeing Economy Alliance that was led by Scotland, Iceland, and New Zealand. And it's certainly interesting. Gender was mentioned in earlier presentations. How 3 female first ministers of I think it was Scotland, Iceland, and New Zealand set up the wellbeing economy. And this was a very interesting talk by Nicola Sturgeon when she was First Minister. And she explains the far-reaching implications of a well-being economy, which plays factors like equal pay, childcare, mental health, and access to green space. So again, and I remember listening to this and going, Scotland, coastal amenity, Loch Ness, etc., and nothing about blue space. So again, it struck home with me that the blue space wasn't mentioned. So the motivation, well, the literature tends to overlook the potential benefits of coastal and other blue space amenities on well-being. So while we do in the paper, we do look at other blue spaces, lakes, freshwater, etc. It is really coastal that we're focusing in on. in this paper. Very large, significant coefficients on coastal and marine variables in the well-being literature. So one of my own papers from quite a while ago now, about 15 years ago, George McCurran in the University of Sussex. Some of you may know him. His mappiness data that I'll say a little bit more about later. So we were finding very, very large coefficients on proximity to coast in our research, larger than the socioeconomic, demographic variables, so larger than health, well-being, or income, etc. And I'll just give you some comparisons in a minute. But also, and this was from George's work, larger than freshwater, wetlands, and floodplains. So it was really coastal that was coming out in terms of those coefficients and those variables. And also that the literature was finding that blue space exposure may improve pro-environmental behaviours. And you can hear more about pro-environmental behaviours tomorrow. Okay, so this is from one of my own papers back in 2008, and these were the coefficients we were finding on proximity to coast. And I don't know if you can see, perhaps in the top left-hand corner, the coefficients on unemployment, and the proximity to coast coefficients are coming out higher, in larger coefficients than on unemployment. Now, could you base policy implications, etc., on one paper, one finding? Absolutely not. It's a cross-sectional snapshot in time. So absolutely, you could base policy on that. But then, of course, George, 2013, he compares, they himself and Suzanne Morato compare continuous urban fabric to other types of land use, and he finds he has marine and coastal margins coming out very much so at the top, and he compares that to mountains, woodland, and freshwater wetlands and floodplains. And so they conclude in the paper that marine coastal environments are by far the most happiness-inducing environments in his sample, as I say, compared to continuous urban environments. And one of the other things he did, I was at an online seminar he gave in I think it was 2020 during lockdown, and he has this fabulous range of mappiness data. He calls it, where you take your iPhone. He only does it on iPhone, unfortunately. He doesn't do it on other smartphones. And you fill out a real-time survey of your life satisfaction, your happiness, what you're doing, where you are, etc. So he has millions of data points in that. What he also does, he asks people to take pictures on their smartphones and upload the pictures. And he was bombarded with pictures like this of coastal, not just beach. This is County Galway on the west coast of Ireland. This isn't one that he got. This is one of my own. But coastal images like these, but that's the cliffs of Moher in the west coast of Ireland. But stunning coastal images where people, these were the happiest places in terms of their self-reported well-being. So, but as I mentioned, relatively little research on this topic, and particularly in the European Union, and I'll come back to the European Union a little later on. So, with the exception of the BlueHealth project, which is run out of the UK, so most of the research has been conducted in the United Kingdom, the USA, Australia, New Zealand, and there's a growing, very, very much growing body of research in China. And yet, we know that people value coastal proximity, coastal amenity. If you, I don't know if you know where Bono lives on the east coast of Ireland, but his house overlooks the coast of the beautiful area of Dublin. The house prices are astronomical, and if you go up the coast to the north side of Dublin city centre, it's very much the same. So huge premiums to be paid on coastal proximity in lots of literature and in lots of different countries. Again, there's less focus on that experiential interaction with the natural environment. So spending time in the environment, lots and lots of data, and lots of research on environmental quality. So how do we measure, or what do we take as blue spaces? So landscapes typified by a water body such as the ocean, sea, lake, river, or stream. And as I say, yes, we are interested in all types of blue space in the paper, but coastal is really coming out as strong in terms of the findings. And it's also in terms of popular media. This is from the BBC, that people are seeing benefits themselves. So the general public is seeing benefits of spending time in blue space. So concept has proved me to be a powerful practical tool for mental health. That was just one. And then there's another one from the BBC, living by the sea reduces stress. And this is borne out in the research in the studies as well. So I can't get through this presentation, fortunately, without mentioning Brexit. Probably mildly annoying for people on mainland Europe, Luxembourg included, critical in Ireland. It wasn't off our newspapers, wasn't off our general media throughout the whole 2016 up until now, and it's still on ongoing process. So really important, almost catastrophic, I guess, in terms of Ireland. But what I want to show here is that coastal endowment that the European Union has. So huge coastal endowment in the European Union, and as I say, it tends to be under researched at the moment. Why is the European Union important? Well, it has a very strong body of protection, laws, etc., in terms of environmental, particularly environmental quality, but also water quality. You can see the range of different laws, etc., directives that govern water quality. Water Framework Directive, Directive on groundwater, flood risk management, all the way down to urban wastewater treatment, bathing waters, Directive on nitrates, etc. So one of the big issues, I'm working on another paper at the moment with colleagues from Queen's University, Belfast, is the divergence or the potential divergence from EU regulation in the United Kingdom, and I'll say a little bit more about that now. So blue space and well-being post-Brexit. So water quality, as I say, a key component of the European Union's environmental acquis or laws since the 1970s. I've potential in italics there for the UK to deviate from the EU's laws. They already are. They already are deviating from the body of EU law. So obviously, again, in terms of the Republic of Ireland, we have Northern Ireland. We now have a border, a border with a non-EU member, and there's already impacts on water quality in the Republic of Ireland due to an increase in intensive poultry farming in Northern Ireland post Brexit. Now, when I've talked to colleagues and when I've presented this material before, people have mentioned, oh well, environment's covered in the Trade and Cooperation Agreement in terms of non-regression of environmental standards. Yes, but only in relation to trade and investment. It does not cover environment for environment's sake. And just, I guess, as an aside, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement is the only agreement in history to raise trade barriers between countries. But that's an aside. So, as I say, the UK is already deviating in terms of its standards from EU law. And there is quite a debate in the House of Commons. I think it was pointed out quite recently about the increase in affluent pollution going into rivers, lakes, etc. in the UK post Brexit, outside of EU law. So as I say, it's already happening. The potential is already happening. This was just from as I say, some other work I'm conducting with colleagues in Queen's University Belfast. So the Northern Ireland Protocol, it's different. It's different than the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. It covers specifically Northern Ireland and that relationship between Northern Ireland and the Republic, but water is not included. So water is not. So we have shared river basins across the island, not included in the. So as I say, that deviation is already happening in terms of environmental standards. So then, in terms of the paper, just how we frame it, how we set it up. Systematic, I use with a pinch of salt at the moment. We're still working on the paper. It's a work in progress. So not quite systematic yet. Hopefully we'll get there. So in line with White et al., that's the leader of the BlueHealth project. We use Scopus, Web of Science, and PubMed. English language papers only. Fortunately, I don't speak a word of any other languages, except maybe a tiny bit of Irish. Includes both qualitative and quantitative studies. So we really feel there is a lot to be learned from those qualitative studies that's missed in the qualitative analysis. And the focus is on the European Union post 2016, because really the divergence happened after the vote. As you can probably see from the table, the number of studies, obviously the UK dominates in terms of this literature. The United States, and if I included China in there, quite a lot. But I mean, what it does reflect and what it shows is the dearth of studies covering the European Union in this particular area. So what do? We use White et al. For 2020. They have created a bespoke blue space and health and well-being model to explain the contribution of the findings to welfare or well-being. So it's just a really, really nice way of framing the findings in terms of what we were getting from the literature. So in terms of exposure and proximity, I'll say a little bit about that in a minute. In terms of mechanisms and pathways, outcomes, and then the effect modifiers. So connectedness to blue space, etc. So as I say, we use that framework to organize our findings. So this is a combination of that qualitative and quantitative data, all broken down and organized. So from 20 participants, in-depth interviews in the qualitative literature with swimmers while they were immersed in the water, to thousands, 8,500 participants in a longitudinal data. So as I say, it covers both the qualitative and quantitative data. So what we find is that the quantitative data, yes, it's really, really strong at showing proximity, exposure, etc. But the measures tend to be different. So in my own paper back in 2008, I looked at 2 kilometers from the coast. There's other literature looking at 10 kilometers, other literature looking at 5 kilometers. And then, of course, in the UK, it tends to be measured in miles, which is problematic with literature in Northern Ireland. In terms of the outcomes that are in yellow, general health and well-being, mental health, suicide, and of course, subjective well-being. So the life satisfaction, happiness measures, etc. So in terms of the mechanisms or pathways, this is really where the qualitative data is really, really strong. So what is it about being in blue space, being in those coastal areas? So you get findings in terms of emotions of excitement, happiness, so therapeutic effects, feeling alive. So the richness of the qualitative data is really, really, really impressive. Then in terms of some of the modifiers. So even the BlueHealth project itself talks about the idea of access, idea of water quality. There really are things that the European Union can promote in the European Union, and they themselves recommend more investment in the European Union's blue infrastructure to promote health and well-being. Okay, so I'll give you some very, very quick key findings from what the paper we're working on. So the quantitative and the qualitative studies are complementary in explaining that conceptual framework and explaining the contribution of blue space to subjective well-being. So White, it's an interesting paper. They did a quantitative systematic review of the research in this area. They concluded there's inadequate, limited data. Basically, the problem in the quantitative research is we're all using different measures of well-being, different measures of proximity, different measures of quality in terms of environment and proximity to differing environments. So we're not comparing like with like. We're comparing apples and oranges. Is one of the problems. The importance of EU legislation to protect water quality. It is inevitable. It's sad, but it is inevitable that the UK's water quality will suffer. It will decline. That is inevitable. That was predicted well before the Brexit vote by Andrew Jordan in the UK, basically, who said that the pressure from lobby groups to get rid of the nitrates directive, habitats directive, the Bathing Water directives, etc., would be so great that even if the minister wants to retain these, it'd be very, very difficult for him or her to do so. So the importance of EU legislation to protect water quality and maintain and enhance blue infrastructure, and also accessibility. So I don't know if you just this finding down in the bottom right-hand corner in green. So use frequency of blue spaces declines when perceived walking distance towards it is higher. So the further away people are from blue spaces, they tend to use them less. So there's literature that looks at elevation. So yes, you could be very far away and have a beautiful view of the coast, but you tend to use it less in terms of that engagement and that immersing yourself in the environment less if you're further away. So in terms of future research, what do we recommend? So there's a need for empirical, longitudinal, using the likes of mappiness data, the time use diaries that you mentioned yourself in your paper. So that moment on moment experience in the natural in the natural environment, but using the same measurement. So Ireland being able to be compared to France, compared to Luxembourg, compared to Spain, etc. That's unlikely to happen outside of EU funding. So it's very unlikely that each of us working in our own silos will come up with these measures in a maybe the OECD will help in that one. This is one thing that I've done a little bit work on myself. Controlling for culture. So language tends to be used as a control measure for culture. Is that inadequate? You know, the difference between Ireland, France in terms of the language, the culture, etc. Is language really enough to do that? I'm not really too sure about that. But maybe some people have some comments on that. Need for standardized measurements and quantitative studies in terms of exposure and other measurements. Include water quality. So, for example, blue flag is great. Yes, it's good to have a blue flag beach. But what about moments where there have been effluent releases, etc., into the environment? So there are issues in terms of using these. I guess they're good. They're used a lot, but are they perfect? Absolutely not. What we really want is real-time information, like we do now in the European Union with air quality. We have real-time information in terms of air quality in the European Union. We need something similar in terms of water quality that we can track over time. More focus on that experiential interaction within the natural environment. So absolutely, environmental quality is fundamental. Not saying it's not, but it tends to be the factor that is very, very much focused on in the literature, rather than, as I say, that experiential interaction with the environment. Where the qualitative, I think it's very, very difficult to replicate findings in the qualitative research in quantitative, or using quantitative data. So they are very much complementary. Valuing coastal environments using subjective well-being data. So I know there is a body of literature in this area, putting prices on improvements in air quality, reductions in noise exposure, and using the marginal rate of substitution between income and whatever environmental amenity that you're using. So it certainly can be done to value coastal amenities. I think it was Carrie who said earlier that in terms of getting politicians to really take hold, if you can monetize those critical infrastructures underpinning well-being, it certainly makes them take notice. Just back of the envelope stuff I've done in the last couple of days. If you took the coastal amenity value of Ireland is somewhere in the hundreds of billions. And that's just back of an envelope. Don't quote me on that. But it's just something I'm looking. So they're incredibly valuable spaces. Okay, thank you. I skipped the time. Okay. So the question was: is it holiday versus exposure, etc. Holiday. I mean, yes, there's elements of holiday. We don't capture that in the. I don't see it coming up in the paper. But if you look at the statistics of where people live, so for example, just as to give you data being released by the Central Statistics Office in Ireland, 40% of the population of Ireland, the Irish Republic, live within 5 kilometers of the coast. So it's not just a holiday thing. People want to live near water bodies, particularly the coast. So I don't think it's just holiday. But I was going to ask the question of the audience. I mean, if you've all your summer holidays booked, most of you are probably going to beaches and places like that. So no, it's not just holiday.
I just wanted to follow up the kind of second question that the person just asked, like is blue as good as green? Because that feels different than the question you just answered.
My question is related. I'm thinking about the size. So the people that have access to the coast are different than the people who don't, I think, especially in the US context. The people who live close to the coast have different political leanings generally in the US. And so that may be an important issue, as well as does the limited access to the coast, partially through holiday or more generally, also inflate its impact, right? So we have more access to green spaces, And then if you were to try to scale up, right, give everybody equal access at a presumably a higher level, would that then diminish the size of the benefit, your coefficient estimate?
Yep, interesting questions. In terms of is blue as good as green? I mean, if you look at the size of just purely the size of the coefficients in the quantitative data, it would suggest, now we need lots more research on this, but it would suggest that blue is way better, margin of magnitude better than green space. But again, the caveat that I put up in terms of White's finding that we need more research that's comparable across countries, across cultures that compare this. We just don't have that at the moment. We're using too many differences in our literature, in our data, to be able to compare like with like. But as I say, with a caveat, blue seems to be better than green, particularly coastal. So inland blue is good, green is good, coast way up, way better. That's, as I say, the accessibility to coast, I think, is enormously important. If, for example, if in 10 years or hopefully 5 or even less, that this does come, that there's so much research behind these findings that coast, it's now unequivocal that coastal exposure is good for your health and well-being on that type of scale. That, I think, accessibility will become a huge issue. The premium to be paid for renting, living, etc., as I say, beside the coast, probably in all European countries, but particularly in Ireland, and I would suggest, I presume the US and in the UK, is huge. People they're priced out of proximity to close proximity to blue space. Generally speaking, the poorer you are, you do trade off environmental quality for higher income, even though the environmental amenity has the same impact on your health and well-being. So that's an important finding, I think, from the literature, is that so the environment affects us all the same, whether we're rich or poor. But of course, if you're poor, you'll trade off environmental quality for extra income. So I do think that